started. You read about neurotransmitters and the effects they have. You said oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. And basically, this is from your readings here. I just highlighted a few things. Okay, so you have these three neurotransmitters and what they're doing. They are reaching a peak typically in adolescence, but although serotonin can be abnormally low and cause problems. So dopamine, or dopamine, I think, I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced, it's about seeking rewards. So this is peaking, and so we already talked about the limbic system seeking rewards. Now you have this fuel kind of going through there that's also raising up, okay? So as the limbic system develops, it stays developed, okay, in an adult brain. But the dopamine, it rises and then it comes back down, all right? Oxytocin works with dopamine in that it will link the rewards that they seek, the risky rewards that they seek, they will link them to social events or social, I don't know what I put up there, social connections. Okay, so there's connecting it to social, back to the same thing I was saying before, connecting it to social events, different people. So that rises up. So now not only are you trying to, is the limbic system trying to do more risky behaviors, dopamine is kind of egging it on, and then oxytocin is increasing and linking it to impressing your friends. Basically is what it's doing, okay? And it gets more potent with increase in testosterone and estrogen, which also begins to peak at this time too, okay? Serotonin is the third one, deals with mood, sleep, and appetite, and usually here what we're looking at are low, abnormally low serotonin levels, which can cause like different things here. I shouldn't say cause, but everything is always linked, okay, it's correlated. Technically, I'm not sure how much you can say one thing causes another. It's really difficult to say. But it's linked to like students feeling or adolescents feeling lonely or carving on themselves, because it actually feels better sometimes to carve on yourself, and you may think, well, how does that work? Well, they get very, very anxious, and so they can actually just take a knife and start carving on themselves, and now the pain's here and the anxiety goes away. So that it's like the lesser of two evils for them. Okay? So we want to understand adolescence because this is why we're in the classroom to teach, along with our content area. So basically what's happening here, I have this little diagram here, and these neurotransmitters are pretty much fuel to the fire for the limbic system, especially the top two. Okay, so they're peaking. This is almost fully mature, and this is very weak. And now this is not only does this, the parent have to manage all these children here, but the children are getting high on all these neurotransmitters, which is making things a lot worse. Make sense? Okay? Can you kind of see the brain in that there? Let's see. Our art people, you can see my abstract drawing there, right? That you can see it. Yeah, the others, they don't understand, you know. They're looking for realism or whatever it is. Okay, so that's the neurotransmitter effect, okay? And that's something that we just learned about in the last really 20 years. Okay, so that's peaking. So now you have these adolescents, and so the question which we had talked about before was how responsible are they? And hopefully with this in mind, you will say, okay, I'm still holding them responsible, but I can understand it a little bit better, and maybe that's why I got to take a little bit more time to kind of work with them. Okay, as opposed to someone who'd be 25 and doing some of the kind of behaviors that we would not expect. Okay, in that case, the prefrontal cortex is there, it is in control, at least it should be, unless there's something going on psychologically, and those neurotransmitters have receded quite a bit. Okay? We talked about last time about students with special needs too. And we did a processing activity. Remember, when I asked a question and some of you were reading it, you had to actually translate it. And that was trying to get you to, it was trying to delay your ability to process the information. That's what it was doing, okay? So you would have to decipher those words, finally get, oh, the meaning, here's what he's asking, and then to say it back, to answer that question, you'd have to now put it into a certain code. Okay? And that kind of gives you the idea that you are just as capable as everybody else in answering the question and in understanding the question. It's just taking you longer. Okay, so that's what a processing delay is. All students, though, gen ed and special needs students, they all process at different speeds. So we talked about wait time and the necessity for wait time. Okay? And that you're trying to, when you ask a question, you are, at least you should be trying to address it to everybody and give everybody a chance to not only understand the question, but think about it and develop a response before you take a response or provide an answer. Okay, so that's the whole point of wait time. Okay? Let's see. I want to do one more activity with you. You're welcome. About lifting your pencil off the page. Go ahead and follow the directions here and see how successful you are. It looks like that. Oh no, it would work. Let's put it. I mean, you might extend the lines a little bit more, but they are. That would work. Yeah. I don't mean to come over here and just laugh, but I mean, it's okay, now those with the 9 dots, because there are 2 different sets of problems out there. Those with the 9 dots, think about this. You don't have to stay in the box for those lines. You can like draw a line that comes out here. Okay? I don't know if that helps you or not. Does that make sense? It's almost assumed that you're going to stay in the box and draw those 4 lines. I don't think you can't really use the thickness of the circles to help you. You're supposed to be a pinpoint. Like this, it would have to be directly over stuff.
Well, if I use a Sharpie, it would be.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Oh, that's it. Show me light. Okay, that's just a quick activity. Some of you had one with, I think, five dots, and some had those with 9 dots. Some had to draw 3 lines, some had to draw 4 lines. Okay, there's a different level of difficulty in there, okay? But you all are kind of doing the same thing, trying to draw a line through these dots, just at different levels of difficulty. Okay, so what I've done is I have changed the lesson based upon, let's just pretend like you're at different academic levels. Okay, so those I gave like the 5 dots to, you're at a lower academic level, or there's some other kind of special need, maybe there's a special need going on, versus those I got the 9 dots. Okay, you're at the higher academic level. But everybody's participating in the lesson, and it's kind of the same thing. By the way, I just handed those out randomly. There was nothing, I didn't aim them at anybody. Now what I'd like to do is show you this video. And as you watch this video, see what type of change we made. And maybe you're familiar with these terms, accommodation and modification. Hopefully you've heard them before. This is just going to explain it a little bit.
For students with disabilities, the right accommodations and modifications can be as important to school success as appropriate IEP goals. These educational supports are similar, but they are not the same. Accommodations change how a student accesses information, participates in school activities, or demonstrates their learning. They do not change the curriculum. Modifications, however, change what is being taught or what a student is expected to learn and demonstrate.
I only need you to do the circled problems for me.
Accommodations can be made by adjusting the amount of work a student must complete, allowing extra time,
Just go ahead and turn your paper in.
Okay, you can go ahead and keep working. You've got about 5 more minutes.
adapting assignments,
Alex, I have your shapes here. Good.
providing extra assistance, or changing the physical setting.
Let's do one page today.
There is no one set list. Because each child is unique, the IEP team must identify specific strategies to help your child succeed. For example, presenting a few math problems at a time may help a student who is easily overwhelmed. Another student might benefit from short breaks, or being allowed to finish an assignment at home. A student who has difficulty writing may be allowed the use of a computer, while students with a print disability may benefit from having tests read aloud.
They went downtown.
A child can be given an appropriate role when working in small groups,
Where am I?
or be allowed to participate in an activity in a different way.
Beware of what? Excuse me?
Being seated near the teacher helps some students stay focused,
So we'll go ahead and discuss this in a minute.
and assistive technology can support a wide range of needs.
And if you need me, you can raise your hand and I'll come and help you. All right?
In addition to accommodations, it is sometimes necessary to modify the curriculum. For example, when the class is learning how to tell time, one child might be expected to identify only the hours. While the class is working on vocabulary and spelling, another child may work from a shorter list or focus exclusively on the meaning of key words.
And 6 with 8 legs.
Parents play a vital role in crafting the IEP. After all, no one knows your child better. So at home, watch for what works and any struggles that continue. Talk to your child about what feels right to him or to her. Make sure the IEP team considers your child's needs throughout the entire school day, including classroom time, non-academic and extracurricular activities, and transportation. You are not expected to have all the answers. Other members of the IEP team will have much to contribute. You can help by making sure that all accommodations and modifications are clearly written into the IEP. Be sure to ask whether any of the modifications will impact your child's graduation. Ask questions, offer ideas, and bring up any concerns you may have. Open dialogue and clear documentation are essential to developing a high-quality IEP.
Gets to middle school.
I didn't know it was this far from the lockers to the buses.
During the IEP meeting, we can talk about adding extra time to stay on schedule.
Oh, okay, great. So we've talked about quite a few modifications today.
Hemos hablado acerca de muchas modificaciones.
Are you limited?
She wants to know if there is a limit.
Now, however, we do want to be careful if we create too many modifications, she may not be able to meet the high school graduation requirements.
Well, Tori likes being around other people, but she also has a hard time with conversation. So I was wondering, did you have, any other ideas that might help her with that?
Well, we could try a peer buddy, or we could work in small groups more often.
These are great goals, but Brooke's in 6th grade and is only reading at 2nd grade level.
This is true. The audiobooks should help her access to content better, and I think we might be able to find some textbooks that are at a lower reading level.
Tori always turns in her homework, but it's not always what was assigned.
Maybe if you can help her get started in class, she'll know she's on the right track.
Sure, I could do that.
I'm unclear who will follow up with each of these items.
I'll handle supports during basic instruction.
And I'll arrange for the seatbelt and keyboard.
Accommodations and modifications should change as your child's needs change.
All right, time for comprehension. If comprehension, then iPad. Are you ready?
You are not limited to a standard list.
Can we play?
So be creative and stay involved.
Can we go to the park?
I would love to go to the park, but you're gonna study first, right?
Your child is counting on you.
Thanks for helping each other out. That'll be great.
All right. So I gave you activity. By the way, this is on your Blackboard site. Accommodations and modifications under all required readings. Okay, so that video is there. All right. Now, for me, I think the difference between the two sometimes can be very, very fine, kind of difficult. I think actually this activity is kind of difficult to label. I have my own idea of where it should be, and I would really love to hear like Dr. Janice or Dr. Dietrich really explain a little bit more. That video really made it to me sound like a little bit of each, but let's take a look here. For classroom instruction, so you're teaching the class, accommodations would be like a student like using a device to help them to listen. Okay, but they're listening to the same content. Okay, and I think that's what this is saying here, but it's still the same book that the rest of the class is reading. Okay, so the expectations are exactly the same. It's just how you're going to get the information into their brains. Okay. A modification would be a student could be assigned a shorter or easier reading assignment. So kind of in the same, so maybe like when you're thinking about like a Hamlet play, for example, and someone's reading the actual play itself and someone's maybe reading a comic book of the Hamlet. But you're still getting kind of the same information, but not quite the depth. Okay, but they're part of the Hamlet play. Okay? For tests, an accommodation would be someone might be able to use like a spell check as they're showing here. Okay, so they're taking the same test, but they're going to use a spell check. It depends on what the test is all about too. Like for example, if it's a history test and spelling, you do take off a little bit for spelling, maybe they would have that to help them. Actually, they are talking about a spelling test here, and they're saying, maybe less words. Okay, maybe less difficulty. Okay, so you kind of get the idea between the two. Then they go through a few other things. I think I'm going to try and print this off for everybody because I think it's a real nice chart. So the activity I gave you, did I accommodate or did I modify? The goal was to think outside the box. Okay, that's what non-standard thinking. Okay? So what do you think? Emma? Okay, I would think it's more modification. Okay, now because for that very reason, so that we're all thinking outside the box. However, some students are given something that's a little bit less challenging, so they're able to still think outside the box, but it's not going to be so difficult for them to, find a solution. Okay, they said something in there when they said accommodation, and I can't remember what when they were going through the video, and I said, well, that could be this too. So if you get them kind of mixed up, it's kind of understandable. Basically, an accommodation would be kind of changing, not changing the information, the objectives, the goals. It's keeping those things the same, but maybe how they're going to reach those goals. Okay, whereas a modification is saying, okay, the goals for you are a little bit different. Okay, so you're going to solve these math equations, but without fractions in them. Okay? So I kind of changed it a little bit. All right, so just kind of be aware of the terminology. Let's see. Now to help you, because when you are creating lessons, the idea is that you're the gen ed teacher, you're going to work with the intervention specialist, but you're working with the intervention specialist. When you go into schools for the first time, you might have an intervention specialist that's assigned to a classroom, or maybe not. But what you may come across, especially with the older intervention specialists and the older classroom teachers, the intervention specialist is basically taking over everything that student needs, and that shouldn't be the way it is. It should be a working partnership. The gen ed teacher is really the one that's responsible in 90% of the cases. They're responsible for the student's grade, not the intervention specialist. Okay, so you should be thinking about how am I going to work with the intervention specialist. They know the IEP a lot better than you, but you have full access to it, and you are still responsible for that student's learning, and you are responsible to change your lesson plan for that student, whether it's an accommodation or a modification. But you aren't left on your own. You can talk to the intervention specialist, and they'll have some really good ideas, and you're bringing it, just like I did. This is right in the lesson. Okay? They didn't pull out the special needs students and say, okay, now you're going to think outside the box, but you're going to be in this classroom, you're going to give a whole set of activities. No, they are actually right there in the classroom doing it. Okay? Does that make sense? So, we've got, we're given an example, and I'm going to hand this out to you. Actually, I'll just hand it out. In the back of this chapter, there was a IEP, and these pages ran off in the wrong order, that's why I have it folded. Oh, I guess you don't need to. Thank you. You're welcome. So here we have Amanda Adams. She's in your classroom. Okay, so this is the front page here, just telling you a little bit about Amanda. Now, ignore the grade level. Imagine that she's in your classroom, okay? Now, if you look at the other pages in here that I gave you, that was the first page and the second page in that booklet, those are also being run off from here. Those are the highlighted ones, which these highlights show up in your document online, okay? And they're kind of showing you the measurable annual goals. In other words, these are the goals that they can measure and that you will be measuring, okay, with the intervention specialist, okay? Now you can see with Amanda, it's basically math, because if you look at that, it says page 9 of 16 in the upper right, that's what I'm looking at, I think it's your front page, is that right? Okay, so you can see that she has some modifications and accommodations for math, that's page 9, and let's see, and then page, well, it says 9B, so it'll be like your third page in there for English. Okay, so you may think, well, I'm in art, or I'm in social studies, and I don't have to have any accommodations or modifications, and that's just not true, because if you have any kind of reading, definitely, or any kind of measurement, for example, which occurs in both art and social studies, so you are responsible for Amanda. So I want you to think about your lessons, and just choose one lesson, but I want you to say how you're going to either modify it or accommodate it for Amanda. Now, should your lesson not really need an accommodation or modification, I have two other students that are also in your class. Take a look at these three students and choose just one lesson, and I want you to take it and make some kind of accommodation or modification. You don't have to identify which one it is, but you're differentiating, you're making the lesson different somehow for this student, okay? Either through an accommodation, like you're going to, like for example, have somebody read something to them, okay? And that's going to be in your lesson plan, okay? Or you're going to give them a different set of problems or a different activity. You're going to modify the activity a bit, okay? But you still have the same basic objective. It just may not be as high academically, okay? So that's what I want you to do for next time. But I'll take that as a quiz grade on Thursday. But what I want to show you is just one other thing that helps us doing this. And that is the Ohio Learning Standards. Now unfortunately there's nothing for art. They don't have extended standards for art. So you have your Ohio Learning Standards, which you're all familiar with, which you all use in your lesson plans already, okay? And you wrote that down on one of your lesson plans, because you need to kind of keep track of everything on the lesson plans, because in about 4 or 5 weeks we're going to bring all this together. Okay, so you've already done that with the Ohio Learning Standards. You identified the standards for each of your lessons. I think you did a Bloom's taxonomy. You kind of worked on it and changed the level of questioning in your lessons. And you identified this is Bloom's level analysis or something like that you did. I think you did a self-analysis on the depth of knowledge, where it was at. Okay, and I think you made some improvements to try and bump it up one level. Do you recall that? I thought I had you do that, to try and bump it up to the next level. Do you recall that? Don't really recall that? Yes? No? 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 Okay, well, if you had, I couldn't remember if I had you do that or not. I know I had you evaluate your own lesson. Okay? So maybe you don't have any notes there saying, to make this in a depth of knowledge too, here's what I'm doing. Now what we're doing is we are what's called differentiating the lesson. In other words, one size doesn't fit all. We're going to, in our lesson, we're going to change it for maybe this student here and this student here, or this group of students. In our case, for the 3 students, you're going to have some kind of changes. You're taking them into account in that lesson, okay? And then you want to make sure that you make a note. Okay, so this is for Gabe. Gabe, I am putting this in for Gabe or something like that. You just want to make sure that you keep track of everything that you're doing. All right? So kind of getting back to the Ohio Learning Standards, you have the 4 content areas of integrated social studies, integrated language arts, integrated math, and integrated science. And for those 4 areas, those areas, and unfortunately we don't have it for art or visual arts, they do have what's called extended standards. And I don't think I've shown those to you in here, correct? Okay, so if you're in those 4 content areas, you are given some help. Because like, for example, this is the standard English, integrated language arts, Ohio Learning Standards, which you had used when, I think, the first day in class. Okay, if you're in integrated language arts, okay? And so we see, like this one here, analyze how a point of view, perspective, or cultural experience is reflected in a work of literature from outside the United States, drawing on a wide reading of world literature. Okay, so they're going to analyze a point of view, they're looking at some kind of world literature, and trying to look at, find the perspective of that literature, that cultural experience that's in that literature. Okay, so that's the standard. Okay, so let's say I'm teaching to this standard, okay, but I've got to make some modifications to my curriculum. I could go to, it's located in the same site, the Ohio Learning Standards, and you come across this one that's called the Extended Standards. Okay, so they're going to take that same, there is the learning standard right there. Analyze how a point of view, perspective, and so on. And now it's going to give me some ideas how I can differentiate my lesson. So I'm not just left there on my own, because when you read that there, you're saying, yeah, I'm thinking, well, how am I going to make it, what am I going to make it simpler? I'm just not sure how to do it. And they're saying, well, here's how you can do it. Okay? The least complex is over here on the right. So in this case, identify cultural experiences in a story or drama from outside the United States. You're just identifying cultural experiences. Oh, you know, here they're in their Hispanic community, they're taking a nap in the afternoon. Okay, you see that that's not even close to where that other standard is, but it's in the same vein as it. Okay, so I might use that complexity C. B is explain similarities between cultural experiences in a story or drama from the United States and another country. Okay, so maybe I'm reading this story from Spain or from Guatemala, and then I'm comparing it to a story that we just read here in the United States. Okay, I'm just looking for the similarities. Okay? And then this one here is explain the differences. So kind of doing the same thing, except now looking for differences. All right? And so all of those are getting closer and closer to analyze how a point of view, perspective, or cultural experiences is reflected in a work of literature from outside the United States, drawing on a wide reading of world literature. So now when you're over here doing this, you are looking for similarities and differences between us, the United States, and whatever this country is. Okay, you are looking for differences in terms of like point of view or perspective. See, but it's very complex. It's not breaking it down to say how are they the same, how are they different. That's what this is doing right here, and keeping things very narrow. Does that make sense? Okay, so you do have an extended standard for, like I said, all 4 of the areas. You can use this to give you some help, because believe it or not, this is really kind of a difficult thing to do, differentiate a lesson. And you're very, very busy people. Every day you're going and you're teaching. Yeah, you do have the intervention specialist, but he or she's very busy too. Everyone's overwhelmed, it seems like. Okay, so that's what I'd like you to do for Thursday. Just turn in a lesson plan and tell me how you are modifying it or accommodating it for each of these 3 students. It's possible that maybe one of the students you aren't going to have any accommodation or modification for. Okay, and I'm thinking like maybe in art you might have a thing where you're saying, well, there's just nothing I can do here. There's no reading and there's no measurement, you know, and that's okay. Yes?
So we're making an accommodation for all 3 of these different students. Could we make up a different lesson plan that we didn't use before, or?
No, I want you to use the same one of the same ones, okay? Because I want us to keep, even though it's getting it's going to get messy for that one, but I want us to work on one lesson, doing most of this towards, so that when we come to another 5 or 6 weeks when I show you the BW lesson plan form, which some of you already know, it'll make more sense. It's all coming from one lesson. Okay? All right, so just do your best, because it's, you know, it's not always easiest for trying to accommodate and modify for your specific lesson. Yes?
Can I have an extra copy
And I recorded this, so I'm gonna send it to everybody, so